Today we look at the scene. And here God is speaking to the Israelites again, reminding them, or when you come into the land you're going to inhabit. Although he just told them, it's going to, you guys aren't going to. I mean, but yet, he promises that, and reminding them of the promise. And when you come into that land, and which I am giving you, you will make an offering by fire from the herd and this and that. So it continues uh, the instructions of offerings that are given, what they should be and how they should be done. And in this part here now, then a drink offering and a grain offering are to be given in addition to the offering of, to the burnt offering or the offering of well-being. And so, I mean, they talk about that, the burnt offering and the offering of well-being. And, so there's, different offerings for different things that way. And even, the offering of well-being, some of those were burnt as well, given and everything. But the grain offering and the drink offering. And it says, whenever you eat of the bread of the land, you will present a donation to the Lord. From your first batch of bread, from your first batch of dough, you will present a loaf as a donation. And so just as when they harvest, when they prepare as well. And again, much of this was then food, I believe, for the priests. And then verse 22, if you unintentionally fail to observe these commandments. So there's for unintentional sins, or if you miss it, and it's kind of, well, how can you unintentionally sin? Well, I mean, you think about, you forget something. You forget to say happy birthday to somebody on their birthday. And I don't do those happy birthday greetings on Facebook, but there are little things that we might forget once in a while, but there are sins that it's just like we say, known and unknown, done and left undone, and so there are unintentional ones. But then verse 30, but whoever acts high-handedly, whether a native or alien, affronts the Lord and will be cut off from the people. So it's, there's a difference between an unintentional sin, which God makes provision for, sacrifice to make atonement for that. But for intentional sins, I mean, it's different. There aren't really offerings, and there's not a way here, specifically for intentional sins. Because here, if you act high-handedly, that person shall be cut off from and bear the guilt. So it's, there isn't any, it doesn't sound like there's any grace for that, which, that makes it hard. And then verse 32, the Israelites were in the wilderness. They find a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath, so they can have a fire, prepare some food. And it says they don't know what to do with him, so they take him into custody because, it wasn't clear what they should do with him. Although the law, the punishment of working on the Sabbath had been established back in Exodus 31. That the punishment was there, but they weren't quite sure what they should be doing, so they take him into custody, and this is some of the hard stuff to read, because they come, Moses comes to God, what do we do? And the Lord says, this man shall be put to death, all the congregation shall stone him. So it wasn't just a few people, but the whole community was there to see it, to participate, and I think probably part of it is as a reinforcement for, this is what happens when you disobey the Lord. And I think back to the Old West in different times, if they caught a horse thief, the penalty was to be hung, and the hangings were often public spectacles, and I mean, he's just, why would you ever want to go watch something like that, but punishment was given, publicly that way, as a reminder to the people that, God means what he says, and there are indeed, punishments for going against the Lord. And then verse 37, God says to Moses, speak to the Israelites, tell them to put a fringe on their cloths with a purple cord on the garments, the blue cord on the garments rather. And you wonder, well, what is that purpose? Well, it was to remind them of the laws. You have a fringe so that when you see it, you will remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and not just follow the lust of your own heart and your own eyes. So it's that reminder that, and I kind of think about it being with, posting the 10 Commandments, in our church or in our schools or in our courthouses or just the words, in God we trust on our coins and on our dollar bills and everything. It's a reminder that there are laws and that there are penalties for the laws. And that's when we're driving down the road, we see speed limit signs and we see signs for curves, and those are there reminding us of what the law is. And so this is what God is saying, so that you remember the law, So when you see this fringe, especially the blue cords, you will remember the law that way. And then this chapter 15 ends with, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. He said, I didn't just do it for fun. I didn't do it for joy. I did it so that I might be your God, that you might worship me, that you might listen to me, that you will follow my laws and my commandments, and that you will know who I am. And, I am the Lord your God. Just that reminder. And then we go into chapter 16, and we find more unrest. People coming against Moses. Korah, the son of this person, and along with Dathan and Abiram, and these people, descendants of Reuben, took 250 Israelite men, leaders of the congregation, well known, and they confronted Moses. They assembled against him, against Moses and Aaron. You have gone too far. You've taken too much responsibility. You think you're so great, and why can't any of us talk to God? Why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? And rather than defend himself, Moses says, okay, in the morning, you guys, get your censers, fill them up with oil and get ready, and you burn, and you come to God. And he says, in the morning the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy, and who will be allowed to approach him. And the one he chooses will be allowed to approach him. So do this. So they do. And in the morning they do. And Moses said, hear now, you Levites, is it too little for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation to allow you to approach? And he says, therefore you and all your company have gathered together against the Lord. What is Aaron that you rail against him? Why? Why are you causing this uproar? Why are you upset? Why are you seeking the power and the glory? So Moses sent for them, but they said, we won't come. And, he says, it's too little that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in this wilderness, that you must lord it over us. So they're remembering the good, the food, the beverages, the good things of being in Egypt, forgetting the hard work of slavery. But you have brought us into this wilderness. Moses was angry and said to the Lord, pay no attention to their offerings, and this is more really hard thing to read, this chapter, because in this chapter, these men are killed, they're consumed, and God says you'll separate yourself from them and everything, and the earth opens up, and these men and their families just, boom, they're swallowed up by the earth, and the earth closes again over them, and people kind of step back so they don't fall into that same trap and everything. And then God still isn't pleased and causes a plague to begin in the camp of people, and in verse 46, wrath has gone out from the Lord and the plague has begun. So Aaron took it as Moses had ordered and ran into the middle of the assembly where it had begun, and he put on the incense and made atonement, and God relented, and the plague was gone. But it's, God is trying to lead his people. He's trying to take care of them. But they're a lot like we are, kind of stubborn and bullheaded and set in our own ways. And it's so hard sometimes just to trust God and to know that God is, looking out for our good that way. But the Israelites in their infancy as being these chosen people of God make a lot of mistakes, as we still do today. We make a lot of mistakes.